Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Today is International Women's Day. The United Nations theme for this year is Count Her In, Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. And around the country, a number of events are taking place with a focus on accelerating gender equality through economic empowerment. This includes everything from the importance of connecting women with resources so they can start their own business, right through to closing the gender gap in employment and pay. I wanted to look in particular at the importance of financial literacy and as part of that, the role and accessibility of financial advice. Sarah Abood is the Chief Executive of the Financial Advice Association Australia. Sarah, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Thanks very much, Sean.
What does financial literacy mean for gender equality in this country and how big is the gap at the moment?
Well, that's a big question. I think there is, without a doubt, there's a gap in financial literacy across the whole country, and that applies to both men and women. We know that people are not leaving school or even university with necessarily great life skills in terms of how to manage your money and understanding of what the different structures and products and opportunities there are out there for people. And I think that's really disappointing. I think it's incredibly important that these skills be taught to all Australians because we all have a really deep need for economic independence and financial autonomy. It's just so important to have that confidence in your own future. A lot of people are disadvantaged when they don't have an understanding of these things. And it's definitely a factor in cybercrime and the levels of scams and frauds and so on that are being perpetrated. Because to many people, these fraudulent providers look like real advisors. You know, the advice sounds really good and often people don't necessarily have the skills or knowledge to sort out the great advice and the things that are going to help them from the things that are just going to rip them off. So I think it's an incredibly important topic.
What about, is there actually a gender gap in financial literacy? So I'm sure kids who are 18 leaving school, that's kind of one cohort. But I suppose the 40, 50-year-old cohort between men and women, it does seem, from what I read, that there is some sort of financial literacy gap there.
Yeah, look, you're right. The studies, there are many studies that are done in this area do continue to show a gap. You know, I think between men and women in this space, the gap's closing, but it's closing very, very slowly. And there's no doubt that there is inequality in that space. And sometimes within relationships, it's probably still the case that the male partner is often taking on more responsibility and more of a role in managing the finances and making the financial decisions. And that becomes a problem, of course, because we know that over 40% of partnerships will end before one partner dies. And often that can pitch the female partner into a really difficult state of economic insecurity because they don't have an understanding of how the family's finances have been managed, where the money is, where the super is, and so on. I think it's a stat that's well understood as well that the fastest growing group of homeless people is actually women over 50 in this country, and very frequently it's related to relationship breakdown. So that's tragic, and it's so important for us to close that gap.
How do we do that? Where do we start?
Well, I think we start with school. So the FAAA has got some material together that we'll be launching for Global Money Week quite soon that's very much focused on financial literacy in school and helping young children develop those skills and that confidence. But the other important point, of course, is that financial advice is a really important way that we can help make a change in that space. And anyone who seeks financial advice from a professional financial advisor, whether as an individual or as a couple, that is going to be an important part of the relationship. You can't be recommended a product. You can't be suggested to buy a product without informed consent. So advisors spend a lot of their time ensuring that people do truly understand what the strategies are that they're recommending to help people achieve their goals, and that they understand the products, the outcomes and so on, and how they will help you get there. So financial advice has a really big role to play in helping close this gap.
Okay, so on Fair and Good, we are always talking about the need to see a financial advisor. It's not as easy, though, as it may sound, because there's actually not enough financial advisors out there. I remember we spoke early last year. Then in December, the federal government announced the last part of its response to the Quality of Advice Review, came up with this idea of a qualified advisor, typically working within a bank or a financial institution, to provide advice to customers. I know you're not a big fan of that qualified advisor idea. Just explain what it is and the pros and cons of it.
Yeah, not a fan's probably a bit of an understatement there, Sean.
I was being nice,
I
Sarah.
think it's a pretty poor term, and I think we can be assured that the term will change because it is confusing, I think, to consumers. But the core of this idea is that there are people who would perhaps be on the path to being a fully qualified advisor, but without having all of the qualifications, which of course now involves a 3-year tertiary degree plus a full professional year, that there may be circumstances where these people can provide assistance to consumers in certain limited ways on a limited set of topics that will still help people. So we are supportive of the idea in principle. We need to see guardrails to make sure that these people are not putting clients on the wrong path, but we think that overall that can be a positive development, that people will have more sources of advice. That advice really critically must be in the best interests of the client, and that was a change the government made late last year. So I think that will help improve the confidence of consumers in those who are providing this advice. Nevertheless, it will be simple advice, it will be limited advice. It won't be the full service that's provided by a fully qualified and professional advisor. And I think, you're touching there on a broader point, which is, of course, we know that the best outcome is absolutely for someone to go and see a professional advisor, get a proper plan done up, and have an ongoing relationship with someone who will hold you to account and make sure that you're continuing to do the things that you need to do to set yourself up for a great future. But there are also advisors who provide other forms of advice that are out there. So a number of our members have podcasts, for example, like the one we're talking about now. They have online channels and so on, and they offer financial education to clients in kind of smaller bite-sized chunks and at a more affordable price. And I think it's important that people are aware those services are out there, and that can help them kind of improve their knowledge, make some changes to habits, and get themselves onto that path where they are in a position to go seek full financial advice later on. Sean, one of the things that I always say, though, when I'm talking about that kind of service is that it's really important for consumers to make sure that it's coming from someone who knows what they're talking about. And we have this great resource on MoneySmart called the Financial Advisor Register. So if you're listening to someone on TikTok or something and wondering if you can, really rely on this advice, if it's really legit, just put their name into the Financial Advisor Register on MoneySmart, and you will know if you're dealing with a properly qualified advisor or not.
Stay with me, Sarah. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Sarah Abood, CEO of the Financial Advice Association Australia. There's still the issue, though, of 5 million people needing advice. And I mean, my view is that everyone needs financial advice, but only 16,000 fully qualified advisors are out there. I'm just trying to work out where in the spectrum the idea of the qualified advisor or robo-advice is another option, which never seems to have come to the fore quite as much as we expected it to be. Like, are there enough qualified advisors out there to actually look after us all?
Look, we absolutely need more qualified advisors. We could put a zero on the end of the current numbers that we have and still not meet the demand that is out there. And certainly that's something I talk to people about too, because financial advice is a great career. And many people who come into the profession have done something else first. Those numbers are starting to tick up. So we had 317 new entrants last year, which wasn't a heap, but it's an improvement on the previous year, and we're starting to see the numbers improve. We've got to turbocharge that because I think we've got to make sure that people have got access to the real deal and full proper advice. And by getting more advisors into the profession, I think that's going to help raise awareness among the general population of what this service is, why it is fantastic, why it is worth paying for and how much better off consumers are when they've sought financial advice. That's a huge focus for us, Sean, at the moment, and will be consistently in the years to come, is getting the numbers up of financial advisors, because we don't have enough to service demand.
How much damage are the finfluencers doing, giving unregulated and often uneducated advice on social media? Is it a bigger problem now than it was because of finfluencers?
Yeah, look, I think that is the case. And I'm not suggesting that every influencer is bad, but there are a number that have a negative impact on clients because they're selling products that might not be suitable for the people who are looking at them. They're selling trading strategies, cryptocurrency, all sorts of things that can absolutely have a pretty diabolical effect on someone's financial situation. In some cases, they're scams. And because it's all online, it can be very hard for a consumer to tell whether the person they're dealing with is actually legit and doing the right thing and giving good advice, or are they just taking payments behind the scenes from, a crypto provider or one of those contracts for difference trading outfits and so on. So that's why it's just so important. Even if you've come across an advisor online, look them up. Because the problem for consumers is if you're not dealing with someone who's properly licensed and knows what they're talking about, you also have no recourse if something goes wrong. So if the thing's a scam or, your balance goes to zero, you're on your own. Whereas if you're dealing with a licensed advisor, there's recourse. There's a complaints resolution scheme. Shortly, there will be a compensation scheme of last resort. So consumers can have so much confidence in dealing with a licensed advisor. I'm always a bit cautious about the general finfluencer term because there are licensed advisors who do engage with their clients online. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can be really great, particularly for engaging with the next generation. Yep. But yeah, it's just that point that consumers have got to be dealing with someone who knows what they're talking about, who's advising in their best interest.
Sarah, we are out of time, but just very broadly, the quality of advice review, which we touched on around the qualified advisor. There's a bunch of stuff in that, though, which is still to be legislated. So the government outlined it late last year, though I don't think we've seen the details, correct me if I'm wrong there, of what some of it means. But some of the gist of what they're trying to do, some of that's good, though, isn't it?
Yes. So, for advisors themselves, a lot of the reforms do have the potential to get the cost to provide advice down. And that's another massive focus for us because a great way to make advice more affordable for consumers is to make it more affordable to provide. And by getting rid of a lot of those unnecessary processes, unnecessarily long documents and so on, that's a great start. So we're really, really excited about those changes. They're being consulted on right now, and one of those changes is regulations that have the potential to dramatically cut the cost and the length to produce a statement of advice, and that's something that will benefit everybody. No consumer wants the current statement of advice and the things, famously 80 pages plus and full of disclaimer text is kind of the software terms and conditions equivalent of financial advice. So what these regulations will do is turn it into a document that's actually engaging for consumers, much shorter, much more straightforward to produce. And I think that's a fantastic change. There are also other paperwork changes like rationalising advice consent and so on that really do have the potential to take a lot of cost out of advisors' back offices. We're really excited about those and keen to see that legislation soon. We certainly hope to see it, maybe around the middle of the year. I don't think anyone would want to hang their hat on that because you never know what's going to happen in the political processes. But we're certainly keen to see those regulations get through in the current term of government so that we can get on with getting the cost to provide advice down.
Sarah, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
No worries. Thanks, Sean.
That was Sarah Abood, Chief Executive of the Financial Advice Association Australia. This is the Fear and Greed Business Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.